But anyway, so we will, make sure to speak slowly, loudly, clearly, as much as we can. But if at any point in time while we're connecting today, just you're not hearing us okay, or again, I sometimes will talk quickly, and if you're like, what did she just say? Just throw your hand up and be like, hold on a second, could you just repeat what you said? So yeah, we just want to say welcome to everybody. Happy Earth Day. We are the bug team, as this gentleman just named. Thank you, sir. Pollinator team. We're the pollinator party. Team bug. Exactly. So yeah, and then I know a couple more people just came in, so I want to just let people know again. There are snacks. Obviously, people here, you all know where the bathrooms are. You're very familiar with this place and the layout. Great. So just as we're connecting today, we also want to just encourage people to make sure to take care of yourself. So we're only going to be together for about an hour and a half, so we're not necessarily going to have like an intentional break in the middle or anything like that. So, but there will be times of transition. So if at any point you need to just go take care of yourself or you want to grab more snacks, please do that. So again, just welcome. I think before we jump into conversation, again, we want to just say welcome, you've arrived. There's a lot of reasons that we choose to kind of have this up on a screen as people filter in. One, this is actually a scene from the Charles River. So this is a photo that was taken by a resident and shared with us. It's funny because this photo, we used it once in a virtual workshop, and now we just use it to open every single one of our workshops. And one of the reasons that we do that is because, and this is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, right, is people are here to talk about flood preparedness, thinking about resilience in communities, right? When we have flooding or we have extreme weather events, how do we take care of each other? How do we take care of ourselves? How is the town showing up with us, right? And people like me and Lexi and our groups, which we'll talk about. But one of the reasons that we also kick this off is because there is a lot of really good science and research done that shows that when we connect with nature, not only is it a really powerful antidote to stress, right? Go walk in nature, your blood pressure will go down, you'll be calmer, you'll have better mental health, physical health. But there's also a lot of really solid research that shows that when we connect with nature, we have more generosity of heart. So when we spend any time connected with nature, whether that's through imagery or directly connecting with nature, we will show up for each other longer and more intentionally. So if there's someone's in a crisis, right, if we've connected with nature, we are able to stay with them longer and be more present with people. So that's another reason we do this, because especially the kinds of conversations we're having with each other, right, this is a way to kind of help us settle in together. So just by connecting with this for even a few minutes, we're able to, be more present with each other, including in times of crisis. So again, I'm hoping everybody who's here today was trying to be here for a workshop that's focused on what we just said, right? Building resilience in communities. How do we create stronger, more connected communities? And think about, different kinds of solutions for flooding here in Wellesley. Has anybody did not know what this was today and is just here because you heard there were snacks? Awesome. That's why we're here. Yeah. So just, I think, quickly introducing the team that's here with us. So just hi everybody. My name's Lee Munier, and I work with an organization that's called the Better Future Project, and more specifically a program called C.R.E.W. So Communities Responding to Extreme Weather. And a lot of our work is around exactly what the name says, which is focusing on connecting with communities to talk about and prepare for extreme weather, flooding, heat, drought, storms, etc. So I just want to give an opportunity real quick for other people on the team to say hello.
Hi, I'm Lexi Lafferty. I'm a grad student at Tufts doing an urban planning and environmental policy degree, and I'm currently CREW's community engagement intern.
Great, and I'm Brandon Schmidt. I'm your director of the Wellesley Natural Resources Commission. They're the 5-member elected board who have care and custody over all of the park and conservation land in town. They appoint the 5-member Wetlands Protection Committee, who oversees permitting and regulation related to construction projects and other activity around the wetlands, streams, and ponds. And they also appoint the 10-member Trails Committee.
So while we are I know the setup here kind of has us here and you're all there and we're kind of talking right towards you and whatnot. But we also want to recognize that while we have a lot of information that we have kind of woven into slides and some worksheets, or not worksheets, like just some informational docs for you all are also a source of wisdom in the community. And so one of the most powerful ways that we can, create stronger communities in response to crises is just to help people know each other better. So we would love for you all to take a moment, if you could, and maybe pair up. So just finding a person next to you, or if there's 3, that's fine too. And just giving yourselves a couple minutes each to introduce yourselves. And so what we're asking you to do is just take a moment to share your name. I wrote down neighborhood, but your address, whatever you are open to sharing with each other. What brings you here? And then what is something that you appreciate, and maybe want to protect or you care about here in Wellesley? So we're going to give everybody a couple minutes. So if you want to just turn to a neighbor, if you're not sure who to start first, we're always just the longer hair or the brighter shirt, however you want to figure it out. So you're going to turn to a neighbor and get to know each other. And we'll yell when to switch. That's a good transition. Okay, so we want to call everybody back to the larger group. So what we would love, again, we have a lot of people here today, which is awesome. So we're not going to necessarily ask everybody to share out, but I'm wondering if there's even 2 or 3 people who would be willing to share not your stuff, but what you heard your partner say. So we see this also again, these are our sneaky ways of building and advocating for others. So, we'd love to hear you share. Who would love to introduce someone else that they heard share their name and their story? Anybody willing to share? Yeah, go for it.
I'll share Arlene.
Hi, Arlene.
Hello. Hi. And she has a big tree in her yard. And she's worried if we had a hurricane or something, could it blow down on her house and maybe even her.
Okay. Do you know who this tree is?
A big oak.
A big oak tree. Oh, yeah. Oaks are magical, too. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Would you like to share? Did you hear? Would you like to share Arlene, would you like to share?
We didn't get there.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Well, then we have to do that at some point. Yeah, okay.
My partner is Phil.
Hi,
and,
Phil.
he has a connection with doctors and is interested.
Yeah. Are you, and when you, your interest, do you work in health or in medical, or that's just something you're really concerned with? Got it, okay. Thank you, yeah. We'll introduce a little more about our program too, but C.R.E.W, we also work with a lot of doctors through, especially some of the Boston-based hospitals, when we hold workshops and stuff, to connect doctors with communities to talk about that exactly. Because actually there's a lot of really good research out of Yale, I think, did research around sort of the 6 Americas of climate change and kind of based on where everybody is on, and sort of their understanding of it or concerned about it, found that pretty consistently, regardless of where anybody is, that your doctor is a person that people tend to trust to share this kind of information with and have these kind of very vulnerable personal conversations. So doctors are key. Was there anyone else maybe from this side? Would anybody like to introduce someone that they sat with? Yeah. Joanna, you said? What was your name? Joanna, okay. Welcome, good to see you here. Yeah, go ahead, would you like to? Gotcha, yeah. So impacts of the different kinds of development on the water table. Yep, and the changes of how we do our built environment. Yeah. You mean in terms of care for plants for your yards and that kind of thing? Yeah, go ahead, sir. Sure. Yeah. So I can say how to respond with this without us going too deep into that particular topic. So yeah, I think a couple things. One, I think so. C.R.E.W specifically is part of that larger organization I mentioned, Better Future Project, and Better Future Project actually houses different programs. One is people might be familiar with 350, which is a more activism oriented arm, which kind of is very much like climate is named in everything. So to get at your question, one of the ways we get at this is CREW intentionally does not have the word climate in our name so that we can connect with people regardless of where they're at. So what we find, and again, a lot of research hope finds too, is that like, in order to kind of bring people along, you got to, one, meet people where they're at, address direct needs first. So if someone is kind of inundated with crises or different issues, right, we need to help respond to those, build trust. And then that often is the way into kind of helping people be more willing to listen to understanding, why I'm experiencing more floods, right? So if there's a lot of resistance around that. Yeah, and I think, and then along the way too, it continues to be challenging. I mean, we're having conversations right now. I mean, it's a very serious thing thinking about like the funding that we receive. So that continues to be something we're navigating too, because of federal administration and what that will mean for our sort of sustained existence or ability to show up in communities. So just want to name that. That's like, while we're out in communities trying to talk to people directly, that we're holding that issue very closely. I know we could have a whole conversation, I think, just focused on it, but we're happy to talk about that more with you.
Follow up to his point.
Yeah.
My son works.
And he still holds his position, but you're saying that he's waiting for his own. Yep. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for naming that. Yeah.
Talking about Wellesley College and the North 40.
It's a great question, timely question. So we just discussed at our last meeting. I encourage you all to watch the video on Wellesley Media, so inclined. They are right now, and back when the property was acquired by the town, they wrote a position paper that was quite clear about their feeling at the time. Now, granted, it's a board of 5 members. They all have their own opinion, but at that time they said, we want to preserve this property, not acquire it for some other use, but preserve it. I think the changing has evolved, or the thought about it has evolved a little bit with some of the other needs. And again, this is one of these things where I think from a pure NRC perspective, it would be very easy to say preserve it in its current state. But we also face a housing crisis that they are members trying to solve these very complicated problems surrounding housing. So I think if you asked all 5 of them, you would get some level of, we need to preserve some of it. There's going to be a conservation restriction on some of it. So the question about what extent beyond that requirement that was required by the sale is going to be preserved, and I think you might get a different answer from all of them. Fundamentally, they recognize the importance of that piece of property to the town. I know that's a very political answer, but the reality is, I think most of them, in the absence of these other really challenging problems, would like to see it kept in its current state.
Nothing gets done very quickly in this.
That is true. My experience too.
I also just, maybe one other quick thing I want to just respond back to what you had said too, that one of the things that we're doing and that it's not, and I want to lift this up because it's not just about climate, it is, or weather and whatnot, is building friendships across issues. So like more and more, right, groups are thinking about like, and this is really about, again, comes back to like resilience, right? So in the face of a crisis, how can we come out on the other side of something more connected than going in? So you're probably hearing about it. I know a lot of academic institutions are talking about this too, but a lot of the community-based organizations are saying like, where is there opportunity here for us to turn towards each other and to help each other? And that is also across issues. So like a lot of what CREW is concerned about is thinking not just about extreme weather direct response, but also connecting with like labor groups who are being, targeted. Our immigrant friends, just like everybody that we can think of that we can build connections with, so that we are all like witness to what each other is going through, so nothing can kind of slide by us. Does that make sense? So just like another thing is just seeing like how this is an opportunity for us to build more strong, I call them, people say alliances, whatever. I prefer like friendships. Like how do we really, can we do that? And then like if an organization is being, attacked in some ways or a collective of people in community, now we know about it. So a whole bunch of us, not just one of our groups, can help show up, and get resources to people who need them. And weather the storm, as much as we can. So I know people are already starting to share some issues, so maybe we can just ask this question directly here and give a couple of minutes for it. So I know people are sharing some direct concerns related to maybe some of the like structures in the city and bureaucracy and some of the larger concerns. Wonder if we can maybe bring it back home a little bit. So you can connect with it as climate change or extreme weather. So we're just curious to hear from you all, like what are some of those things that you're experiencing, you're impacting, or you're concerned about? I know you already had started to mention about the concerns around like development and the built environment on the water table. So that was one thing that was mentioned. Are there other sort of top concerns that you all have or impacts? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, there's a couple of things. The insects. As well as perhaps some forms of sickness.
Sure. And that connects, I think, a little bit to the public health issues. Yeah, go ahead.
Could you go back to the preceding slide?
Sure. This one?
Yeah.
Or this one?
It was the one about, you had some solutions.
Well, we do have some slides that have some ideas on them, for sure. This was more just kind of, we didn't go into it because people were already starting to kind of get into the conversation a bit, but just sharing some of the things we wanted to make sure that we connect with you all on today.
Oh, yeah, make an awareness of how nature-based
Yeah.
solutions, well, what are they?
Yeah, great question. Okay, hold that thought. That's part of today's conversation. Yeah. We'll talk about that like regionally, town, and then also what things people can do at home too. Yeah. Were there other sort of concerns or impacts either that you're experiencing or that you're witnessing? Yeah.
Well, a lot that I see on news, because I guess in Wellesley we haven't had any foliage, and out in the summer, that's going to dry up and then be forests, or I know there's
No, you can. If there's someone that you think has an awesome program. Yeah.
they're trimming and they're doing some
Yeah.
to try to keep limited so that they aren't quite so combustible. What's the
Sure.
word? Not flammable.
Yeah.
Flammable. I don't know which.
No, I appreciate what you're saying because I think often we celebrate the rain, right? Like, oh, thank God we have the rains. That's so great. We want that for more lush forests and for healthier plants and whatnot. But if it's now, as you mentioned, going to be paired with kind of this roller coaster of weather changes where we could have intense rains or we could have a solid rainy spring that's good for the plants, it doesn't necessarily carry over. We might see the flip side of that immediately after and see a drought or something that then now we have all these beautiful plants that have been are now become a concern for fires because it's followed by these potential drought season over the summer.
So what can be done about it? Probably people don't have the time.
Yeah.
It takes.
This is where I always call on, you'd have maybe some other ideas for local. I'm always just like, the youth. Get the youth out there. We'll get them out of the classroom and get them out in the world doing more active stuff. So I'm always just thinking about like teenagers and stuff like that. So when you're thinking like, who in the community could we get to Like, can we get more creative around the kinds of programming and more activate, I think, the young people in the community to go out and do it, and then they get to know the land better too. So that's just, I feel like for me, I just think about that across communities. But I don't know, Brandon, if you have a thought on that.
Yeah,
before we move
it's a
on.
great question and one that we've begun thinking about, but really in terms of how do we respond if there is a forest fire, so that people can quickly identify where it might be and how our public safety officers can get there. But haven't really thought about it in terms of kind of overall forest management. There are management plans for the town forest. And I would argue the understory is kind of underdeveloped in our forests because they're very mature and they don't have a lot of understory. But there have actually been not wildfires, but we think fires that started because somebody left a cigarette butt over at Longfellow. That was a very serious kind of dangerous situation. Luckily, it was a very low burn area, but it's one that we're thinking about more in terms of how we respond versus how do we manage the potential?
Wildfires move.
Yeah.
Wildfires in California, we just had huge ones.
Yep.
Okay, that stuff, that particular matter, drifted into Wyoming and Colorado and big amounts. Last summer, I was walking through Perrin Park, and a bunch of people looking up, and all that smoke from Canada was coming down into our area here. About a half hour later, my son called me. He was in New York City. He said, "Dad, it's dark out." He put his phone up and it was black. Everything was dark.
Well, there were huge wildfires up on
In
the
North
seacoast, North
Yeah.
Shore. Yeah, I mean, many thousands of acres burned. So it's hard to. We don't think about that on the East Coast, but they're definitely. It's a growing concern.
I wanted to just give opportunity to the gentleman in the back. He had raised his hand. If you want to just touch. Or anybody else has another, any other concerns that you want to share before we go on? Yeah, okay.
Emissions from idling engines are affecting air quality as well as temperature, climate change. Wellesley has a no idling ordinance, but it's, as well as the state of Massachusetts has a no idling ordinance. Why is Wellesley not doing more to enforce that? I actually ask people to shut their engines off. But it usually, I get just a dirty look
Or you learn some new vocabulary.
Colorful
Yeah,
colorful.
exactly.
conversations occur.
It's such an easy thing to do. I don't
Yeah.
understand why people ever idle. I don't understand
Yeah.
why they turn their car on before they're leaving or why they don't turn it on once they turn it off when they get there. But Wellesley, I don't understand, since it is a no idling ordinance, why they don't enforce it. There's supposed to be there's signage in front of the schools.
Yeah.
But,
And people still sit
and
there and
people
idle.
idle under
Yeah.
the
Right under the
signs,
sun.
under the
Yeah.
signs.
I mean, enforcement is always, like you're naming an issue that I'm like, oh, like I live in Somerville and it's the same, we have, so it's just I don't know if that gives comfort or makes you more stressed out. Like, oh, it's not just here, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. But yeah, like the concern that when we pass things, but then do we have the enforcement mechanism? I'd say two things, like asking the question, which you're welcome to respond to from a town voice in this, but just thinking about like, one is, is there enough are there enough resources to actually enforce the thing that we put forward? And then also thinking about like, a lot of this also does require like a culture shift. Like so many people, it's like ingrained to keep the engine running, like aren't even thinking about it. I mean, I've been in a car with my friend and I'm like I'm sitting there in my car and be like, it's idling. And we're in the middle of having a conversation. She's like, oh, my boyfriend broke up with me. It's so sad. And I'm like, oh, but can you turn your engine off right now? So like, a lot of times the engines are on, people are having conversations. So it's like, but it's also kind of that shift of culture or like raising, it being normalized so it doesn't feel like it's it's something to get defensive or.
Well, it literally ruined
Yeah.
my walk.
Yeah.
Because I see it so much as
Yeah.
I'm walking.
Yeah.
Stop. Some people, some people will say, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
some
yeah,
will
totally.
just Give me the dirtiest look.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Leave me alone,
Yeah.
maybe,
Well, I commend you for like the having the skill and openness to like kind of approach people
Well,
and
I just
to do
say
something
what
about it.
you
And if you're welcome to, if you have anything you want to.
Police recommend you
But
don't
just-
speak to people.
Yeah.
But then when I've called the police, when I see someone idling for half an hour and they never come,
Yeah.
they never come. They'll say, oh, we'll send someone, they never come.
Yeah.
So-
One time there was a policeman for the Wellesley campus, and he was just picking up somebody at a dorm. And he was idling for no good reason. He was very sweet, when he appreciated my comment.
Yeah.
Well, good, I'm glad that he did.
I know sometimes it helps to like a lot of people, it like requires, it's, that's what I'm saying, like culture shift, like education, or hearing something multiple times from lots of different people, you know?
How about if they do it in the schools? How about if they do it
Absolutely.
in the
Yeah,
grammar school and
education.
tell their kids, don't let your parents idle.
They-
Tell them it's really
Yeah.
bad for the environment,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know?
And I think they've done that. I remember when the kids at the middle school were handing out flowers to the people in line saying, here's something
Please
for
don't
you, can you
idle,
please
right.
turn your car off?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you know, that's my perspective. I
Yeah.
can't speak to the police. I think they have a hierarchy of priorities, and these are one of these regulations that it's not popular to kind of cannibalize your community that you want to serve on something that maybe they don't look at
It's
as.
important.
And I think they do look at it as important, and
Yeah.
they've committed to sustainability as part of their operations, but it's just the interactions, they're focusing on positive interactions, and they have to evaluate. So I don't want to speak for the police department, but
Yeah.
it is a police department regulation. And so from many of the other groups in town, we are approaching it from an education
Yeah.
perspective, so change that habit.
Yes.
Thank you for raising that. It's a yeah, like a multi-pronged
Yeah.
approach, just same as anything, you know, to help shift mindsets, or like also being like, I appreciate what you said about the flower, like whenever we can come, that's actually great, that's an organizing tool too, like when people are, if you're having a protest in the street and like all the traffic is stopped, like you also could, those are people who are there witnessing and maybe getting frustrated, like you go up and give a card that explains what's going on or why we're doing what we're doing. So sometimes just having that along with like a flower or something that's like a gift to someone kind of opens people up. I think sometimes too, it's tough when someone's in the middle of the practice to talk about it with them versus like, you know, catching them when they're not right in the middle of doing it. Yeah. So I just want to shift real quick to just give you a sense of kind of some of our groups and kind of what is supporting us coming to this space today. So as I mentioned, you know, Lex and I are here with a group called C.R.E.W, Communities Respond to Extreme Weather, which is really just, like I said, a focus on building out networks of leaders and community members to help increase our resilience, increase our ability to respond kindly intentionally to extreme weather events. And then we're actually wearing a couple different hats here today, me and Lexi, because what brings us here is that we are currently in partnership with a group that you might be more familiar with, which is, I mean, does everybody here know the Charles River, right? How many people get to actually connect with the river? Do you get to connect with the river ever? The Charles River, do you get to connect with the river? Yeah. So are people familiar with the Charles River Watershed Association as well? So essentially, right, so Charles River Watershed Association has been around since 1965, so 60 years this year. And C.R.E.W is essentially like the organization that holds a lot of responsibility for protecting the river, for cleaning up the river over the last 60 years, being out doing education around the river, addressing invasive species, addressing pollution. And it's not just the river itself, but thinking about all the tributaries, right? So the full watershed. So it's not just the Charles River that's the Charles River watershed, but it's everywhere that the water runs into the Charles. So you are potentially in the watershed even if you don't see any water around you. So I just wanted to name that, you know, we're here in connection with them because, again, the focus here is talking a lot about flooding and impacts basically of riverine flooding, which occurs because of strong storms and rains that flood the river and flood the tributaries and then, cause concerns in communities. So I just want to lift up real quick the Charles River so you have a sense of like where Wellesley is in the Charles River watershed. And the river itself is about 80 miles long, runs all the way from Mount Hopkinton all the way up to the Boston Harbor. And then, like I mentioned, there's a lot of different kinds of programs that C.R.E.W facilitates and people can get involved in. And it's anything from education to direct volunteer opportunities in the community. I'm a big fan of getting on the river. So they have some events you can get in canoes and rip out water chestnuts, and that's my favorite thing. But it's river science, restoration, the things that bring us here, right? Talking about resilience building in communities and education. You mentioned about wanting to know more about nature-based solutions. So like how do we address stormwater and riverine flooding by utilizing nature? So that's a lot of what C.R.E.W does. And then what connects us to being here today is that C.R.E.W, in partnership with towns like Wellesley, many towns and cities throughout the watershed, have gotten funding from the state to do kind of a larger flood response initiative. And that includes like different elements. And one part of that was creating a flood model to basically help us understand where is flooding happening, how intensely is it happening, what is the projected flooding increases over time. And then in addition to that, could we model, which is what C.R.E.W is doing now, not just the flooding itself, like we don't want to just say, hey, here's where flooding's happening and good luck. It's where's flooding happening, and then where could we do projects to help respond to flooding in communities. So this flood model is available online. It's kind of wonky. It's mainly made for planners to use. It's using like something called GIS mapping for people who aren't familiar with that. But you can definitely go to the website and put your address in and choose the different storm scenarios if you want and sort of see based on the color blue. The darker the blue means the more intense flooding is occurring in that area. And then where this the flood model also plays a role is in helping to bring the different cities and towns together, right? Because water does not care about these made-up borders that you saw here. They don't care about that. Water is going to move where it wants to move. So another piece of this flood model work is actually connecting the cities and towns together to be more intentionally planning and responding to flooding and sharing ideas, right? There might be something awesome happening here in Wellesley that Hopkinton doesn't know about but could learn from. So that's a large part of this too. So this is just lifting up, where we are right now. And then you can see on the flood model, when we zoomed in, you can see that there's some sort of key areas around here where you see some blue. So again, this is what's considered a 2070 100-year storm. That's basically just kind of like the most intense storm scenario that you could think of. So if you put that layer on the map, you can see just, not necessarily this building itself, but there are some key areas around it that would see some pretty significant flooding, especially over by the high school, as an example. So I'm just going to briefly explain, and you're asking about what is that, the nature-based solutions, and then I want to turn it over to Brandon, who's going to share a little bit more about what's going on here in town. So nature-based solutions are kind of exactly what they sound like, right? So it's just thinking about whatever the extreme weather or environmental issue is that we're experiencing, how can we utilize nature or mimic nature in responding, right? So this is not just, putting in a large water treatment plant. Has anybody ever been to the Alewife stormwater wetland? It's in Cambridge. It's awesome. I think that's a really, really great example of like a large scale project that happened. So I'm just thinking of something here that's close to where I live. So there was actually a lot, Cambridge, Belmont, Somerville, right, Arlington, were all thinking about an area that was coming into the river and saying, we could put in a large water treatment plant, but why not use nature instead? So rather than building a massive, ugly water treatment facility, they put in a stormwater wetland. So now there's ducks and walking paths, and it's magical. It's a magical place. So just, again, thinking about how we could use nature to help respond to different kinds of extreme weather events. And in this case, like I said, our focus today has been mainly on flooding. So these are just some examples of different approaches, different nature-based ideas. Trees are magical. That oak tree that was mentioned, right, is doing a lot to help us address flooding. Restoring wetlands, coming back again to some of the things people are talking about with sort of stronger regulations and enforcement of those regulations. And then something called green stormwater infrastructure, which this is just an example here of what's called like a rain garden. So on the top, it just looks like, oh, that's nice with some plants. But it's very intentionally planted and then potentially has some increased like storage capacity underneath that you can't see from above. So those are just some examples. I think I'm just gonna turn over to Brandon to talk about some of the things happening here in town.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can come over there, but we'll just leave it here for 1 second because I think this is a great. So in Wellesley, just these are things are available to you right now. We have a tree canopy plan. We have identified areas where we've lost tree canopy over the last 11 years. And right now, you could call our office and get your name on a list for a brand new tree planted by the town. The one caveat is that it has to be outside of the right of way, so that little grass strip along the street, we don't want to plant it there. It's just not a good place for a tree to grow. But anywhere within 20 feet of that, the town will come and plant. I'll make sure I'm talking into the mic. The town will come and plant in your yard. We're also looking at using some of the tree preservation bylaw funding that the town receives when people take down trees as part of a construction project. That we're hoping to expand and use in people's back and side yards where these public funds cannot be used. Stronger policies and regulations, I'll just mention it. The town did adopt a stormwater bylaw utility. So now in addition to some of the other utilities, you pay water, sewer, you pay a stormwater fee. So as houses are built and take up more of the pervious space on the lot, they might pay a larger amount in that. So that's one thing to address, fund some of these larger projects that we might talk about later. And then finally for the green stormwater infrastructure, backing up. So the town has been looking at various locations.
Sorry, I'm like standing by the podium the whole time. I was like, I could just pick it up. Thank you.
So as part of the Charles River flood model that was mentioned, one of the sites that came up as a priority is Longfellow Pond. So at the north end of Longfellow Pond, very close to Route 9, is an earthen dam. So every so often, the Office of Dam Safety of the state looks at all the dams in the state. And similar to the one in Natick that is coming out, everybody thinks that giant concrete structure is the dam. That's actually the spillway. The dam is actually the earthen part. And where there is existing vegetation, particularly large trees like that may fail, that will give that dam a low rating in terms of it's vulnerable to failure. And so they kind of rank it in two ways. Simply, what's the probability that it'll fail? And if it fails, then what's the consequence? And so this is one dam that it's earthen. It has a bunch of plant material on it. So the way to address that is rip all the vegetation out and put in giant riprap. But then you lose this view. So I think we were really hoping that it never came to that. But based on the flood model, this is one area where you could reduce the risk of downstream flooding if you did something to the dam. And so we've been looking at kind of outlet structures. There's another area that, let's see, which direction is this? This is the dam right here. So Route 9 is right here. There's an area here where we'd actually like to maybe build some kind of storage area where we dig out, and that would allow floodwater to intercept there. Maybe put in a small tree nursery or something like that. But this is one site just that is kind of ripe for some nature-based solution.
Charles River on that map, where is that river connected with Longfellow Pond?
Let's see. So the Charles connects kind of that way. Because this is oriented upside down. So this is north, that's south. So if you think about Wellesley, the Charles River's on this side of the town, and then on the south side of the town.
So it doesn't connect with any of the bodies of water?
Not directly, no. The Rosemary Brook is that way going into Needham, So where the Charles comes through Needham is up on the top, and then where it comes around kind of by 128 is over here.
The dam on Cedar Brook Road at the Reed's Pond.
Reed's Pond. So those, Bogle Brook and Boulder Brook both feed into Moore's Pond. That eventually then goes through Lake Waban and out to the Charles from there. Yep.
Okay, whenever there's a lot of rain, if the water comes down the street, which is Crest Road, to the bottom, then into, probably under the streets, into a pond somewhere.
Yep.
But we've never had any experience of our cellar flooding. And our neighbors don't see any problems with that either. So we're in good shape.
That's good. Means you're on the high ground, and at least for the time being, the stormwater conveyance system is working. Yep.
Relative to all this, as you're going towards Needham on 135, there's a new development before the recycling, for the RFD. It's a huge area.
Yeah.
Why was that contractor allowed to eliminate so many trees to do that? Left nothing standing. Cleared way beyond what was necessary. Was that ever an issue brought to the town's attention?
Yes.
It was.
That is an extremely complicated answer. Basically, it has to do with the zoning rules that were allowed at the time and the town's desire to add housing and the by right privileges of the person who owned it. So that went through a bunch of different designs. It was subject to the very recently adopted Natural Resources Protection District zoning rules, but ultimately that's the design that was allowed by right. Yeah.
Along with the tree thing, we have these signs when you enter Wellesley, always remind us this is the tree city.
Yes.
I talked to some contractors who do the knockdowns and then rebuilding. They said on average, maybe 3 or 4 mature trees go down for each property.
Yes.
And that you multiply that times the 500 tear downs, you get almost 6,000 trees that have already been lost here. Mature trees, it takes 30, 40 years for them to grow back. That's really a serious issue.
I agree.
You're putting a building up with 10 rooms for a couple and maybe 1 or 2 kids at the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, simply put, this is an issue that exists across the Commonwealth. I'm on the Tree Wardens Association. This is something that every single town is dealing with. It took 4 or 5 tries for the town to get a tree protection bylaw. It does not say you cannot remove trees. People, I think, when that passed, it passed because people felt like it was a compromise, but they were not willing to give up the right, to give away all the right for all the trees on their property. And so the tree preservation bylaw is intended to encourage tree preservation, but it does not prohibit cutting trees. That it does not do that. It says you have to.
$200 exemption for a contractor to their list, that if they cut down $5,000, it's nothing when you think about the big profit.
I agree. So if you all would support changes to the tree preservation bylaw, so would I. And I think so would some of our commissioners. Valuing what is the tree worth, I think that's definitely something we can look at. Changes were recently made that it included more of the trees. So right now, the only trees that are subject to it are the ones on the outside, kind of the donut around the building lot and everything within that. And so there you go with the 135 Great Plain, that development, really, it was only the exterior ones that would have been subject to it anyways. Yep.
On the positive side, the Rotary Club is bagging saplings
Yes.
for grammar school children.
They're doing that today, right?
Today.
Yep. So every 4th grader or 3rd grader in Wellesley gets a tree. Yep. But sign up. This is something you can do next season. We will come and plant a tree. They're doing it right now. I drove by this morning and saw them planting. Charles River Climate.
Oh, yeah, well, actually, do you want to, what is your understanding of the Charles River Climate Compact? I was curious to hear, what, or your experience of it.
Yeah, so this was a great project that we've been working with. Primarily, the NRC department staff have been attending meetings regularly, and really the commitment on the town's part was to provide data on the infrastructure related to stormwater conveyance in the town. And what that did then was allow the analysts to look at the whole watershed and say, what are the pinch points? So are there undersized culverts? What is the elevation going to do if we get these storms? Because we use these models for stormwater, like for all of the permitting. So much of the wetlands permitting, when we get a new building, we say, okay, what is the impact of this new building in terms of stormwater? And so this helps the whole region look at, what is our building, what are our building habits, what is our change in land use doing across the region. And so that's what all the communities who are members of these. We've also looked at, collective efforts to review tree preservation bylaws, look at tree planting programs, look at bylaw updates, stormwater. So it's a way to communicate across these and not have to duplicate all this effort that every little town is doing it a slightly different way. Are there some ways that we can create efficiencies that work for kind of all the communities?
Yeah, maybe one other thing or a couple of things I'll just name on here too is, I think coming back to this idea again of like water doesn't care which community you live in, right? And I think what C.R.E.W thinks about too, and we think about, I'm always thinking about how do we be like water and be more connected, and how do we embody community in like our approaches and our responses? So the Climate Compact is also in that sharing with each other and learning from each other. It's about an intention of building a community, and about changing sort of the culture that has been for a long time, like silos, right? Towns working on their own thing, and then thinking like we're alone, and how do we do this? But you have neighbors 3 towns down who could be a friend to you. So a lot of this is also just about building a culture of community when we're thinking about flooding response. And the reason that this is also really important, especially in this area, to have this compact is because Massachusetts does not have a strong county connection, right? So there's not, it's either the towns and the cities or a regional group that's going to bring people together. We don't have sort of county structures that would sort of naturally connect Wellesley with all your neighbors, right? To have, and to build out some of these responses. So it's in the absence of a structure that exists in other states in the US. And then you are the connector.
Great, thanks. Okay, so looking at some of the projects that the town has taken on recently, everyone, I hope, has been on Fuller Brook many, many times. Fuller Brook is primarily a stormwater system. It serves one of the larger, more dense, sub-watersheds. So all of the streets that abut Fuller Brook and beyond are all that stormwater is carried through either Caroline Brook, which then feeds into Fuller Brook, or from Fuller Brook all the way down to the Charles. So back in, I believe, 2017, the restoration project was completed, and it includes nature-based solutions primarily. So much of Fuller Brook was just an armored bank, which back in the 30s or whatever was the way to go. Just get the water out of here as quickly as you can. Well, that's good for a set amount of volume. But if that changes, then all of the cement and metal structures that we've bent to house it don't work anymore because it overflows. So what is the response? They've removed much of that and installed kind of a more natural system. So let's see, on the upper right, you can see the contours of the banks that they rebuilt. These structures, they have the unfortunate name of root wads, but they were basically invasive species of trees that they cut down, left about 10, 15 feet, and then shoved them in the bank. You can see the old armored bank right here in this picture. Those are the cement. That used to be the base of how the water was taken out. But these are just roots of Norway maples that are in there. They stabilize the bank, and then they add kind of oxygen to the water as they move downstream. But again, using a very natural, a tree might fall and do this naturally. We're mimicking that. Native vegetations, little plugs were planted along the banks in certain areas. That picture on the upper right has what's called a rock vein that goes across the stream. Again, adding oxygen to the water as it goes over, places for little invertebrates to hide and kind of collect there. Up here, we mentioned the rain garden. This is a slightly more sophisticated rain garden, and this is very constructed, but it's still a nature-based solution where this is a series of kind of strata of different soil and rock that allows water to enter this chamber. It's called a bioretention basin. It enters there and slowly drains down to a drain that then leads out to Caroline Brook. So in a heavy rain event, the water will come in and just kind of sit there and slowly drain down. Meanwhile, all this new vegetation is removing pollution and sediment from that incoming stormwater. And then you see here just kind of a different type of treatment of the bank. And primarily you have some part of Fuller Brook here and then another side stream coming in from one of the streets nearby. Question?
Could you comment on the covering of that invasive plant with large sheets of heavy, looks like rolled roofing?
Yes.
It's been done. Something about that?
Sure. Knotweed is like the scourge of invasive species. It's a beautiful plant, and it's one that when it was probably brought over, it was the next new thing to replace kind of bamboo, and it looks beautiful. The bees actually love it, but it is extremely aggressive. The way it grows underground through rhizomes, you can't really eliminate it. You can cut the top off of it for 30 years and it'll still grow back. I think it's considered a hazardous waste material in parts of Europe. Those are specifically there to suffocate and sterilize knotweed.
How long is it going to take?
I don't know. So 2 years ago, we started a pilot where we ripped up probably about, 150 square feet of it. So not much, but if you want to go see what it looks like, it's at Cottage Street on the north side. So the south side of Cottage Street for almost the whole block between Cottage and, what's the next street over? Appleby, but even further. Anyways, a lot of that black plastic, we're trying to figure out what to do with it. The town did approve a budget, and we have a budget to expand that initial pilot program. But we want to get rid of it too. The Parks Department has tried to put wood chips on top of it just to disguise it, and then they get washed off down in
If
the
they remove that, would that plant regenerate?
Yeah, we think so.
Because it's been smothered for,
Yeah.
5 years now?
Yeah, it really takes, because it doesn't take much, and then it would take back off. And so where they left a hole for like a tree, it's popping out of that area, so we know it's still there. But it's definitely something we're trying to get rid of.
So what do you do to recycle the plastic? There must be a lot to get rid of.
Yeah.
Unless you reuse it somewhere else.
Yeah, and then would we want to reuse it if it's kind of potentially contaminated? We mentioned the tree canopy project or program. This is the first instance where we've used tree preservation bylaw funds. The Denton Road has a conservation district, and so neighbors there contacted us, said, we want to get involved, we want to take action with the climate action plan. And so we said, we have a first great idea. Why doesn't everybody adopt a tree? And so we dropped 20 container trees. We led a tree planting training over there, and many of the neighbors picked one of the 20 trees. On the right side of the screen is just a screenshot of our tree canopy assessment that shows how the tree canopy has changed, or the total tree canopy there right now. I forget exactly which metric it is, but the town set a goal in its climate action plan to have 65% tree canopy by 2030. And we are well on the way. We're right around 55%. But we don't think we can get there by just planting in the front yards. We have to start planting some additional trees in people's backyards to make up for some of the losses that we're experiencing from construction. Here are some other ones. On the left was when the Lee softball field was reconstructed, they had to move a small drainage structure and actually cover it up, which is the opposite way of kind of where we're headed now. They had to put the stream in a pipe, but to make up for that, they constructed a whole new wetland. And so that serves as the drainage for the new softball field and provides this new habitat. And on the right, it's not specifically related to extreme weather, well, I guess stormwater, but in an effort to ensure, that we're trying to ensure biodiversity. At Simons Park, right next to the library, we converted 10,000 square feet of turf grass into a new pollinator garden. So we called it habit to habitat, where this habit of mowing and treating your lawn and watering. Well, let's just take the grass out, plant plants, and the science really behind it is there wasn't one species. We looked and we worked with this entomologist and landscape designer who are really saying these are the plants that we need to be planting for all stages of life for these insects that are threatened in Massachusetts. So every plant that is in there is a food or habitat source for threatened pollinator species. So I think that was the difference. Like, throw milkweed out in the field, that's great. That's a wonderful thing to do. But there's this whole other host of other bees, wasps, butterflies, dragonflies that are threatened. And so these are the plants that they need to survive. So this is just starting to bud out, but definitely walk down Fuller Brook, enjoy that, and then you can hop right over to the library and see this new landscape.
It's a small example of that near the village church with all the roads.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's fantastic too. I go out there and you see thousands of bees. They're just rolling around, having the time of their life. Was this me too, or?
Sure, I think it was just like an opportunity, if it felt like it was helpful to have more, a space for you all to be able to offer ideas, was all based on what you've heard. You've heard some projects happening locally. You've heard some examples of projects. Are there, whether it's solutions or locations or just like, is this kind of like getting you thinking about like, where would you love to see more solutions, or what kinds of solutions would you love to see more of? Like, are you like, oh yeah, the tree thing, that sounds awesome, let's keep doing that. Or wow, the rain gardens, like are those happening? Could you put signs out so we know where they are? How do we do more of that at home? Like, so just if there's anything that this is helping you to think about solution-wise. So of what's been presented, are there solutions you'd love to see more of in your community? Or are there sort of hotspots or key locations that you think these kinds of solutions could be, really helpful?
Well, I'd have to say, I think the town's doing an amazing job. There's a woman who routinely plants flowers with a crew and a watering truck. They beautify the town. You people are doing this, presenting it. There are things being done everywhere. It's too bad every community in the country doesn't adopt your approach to active engagement and so forth.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty terrific.
Yeah, her name's Susie. She's amazing, public works employee. And yeah, Susie Jordan. So I will pass that on. Thank you on behalf of her. I don't know. The way I think about this is that I think it was Doug Ptolemy who said, he's the guy who was like, we can rely on our national parks. Or everybody used to say, we can rely on our national parks. That's where the birds and the bee and bears and everything can live. And now it's like, we can't rely on that anymore because we've kind of expanded our own footprint. And I feel like it's the same thing. Thankfully, Wellesley has the staff, has the resources. We can do these types of things. But I would argue it's still not enough, and that's where all of the plants that we planted at Simons Park, we have that whole list. You can do this at home. Just, it doesn't take much. You can do that. You can plant a tree yourself, or you can get the town to plant a tree. These are things that you can do. And I think that, I know the question that I have is, in addition to what would you like to see in the community, what resources do you all need to take it home? And I'd be curious about that too.
Could you talk about the biospheres? I don't understand that.
The bioswales, let's see. Yeah, so these are, again, these are kind of all modifications of the same idea, where you create an area where water can pool, slow down. The one on the right, I actually don't know what the one on the left functions as, except if I had to guess, you have a paved area behind it, and there are bioswales in the parking lot here, in between the paved areas. So it's an area for water to enter before it just kind of drains into a pipe. It can slowly filter down. And so you'll see this a lot on the side of the road where there's a curb cut, allows water to get in versus sheet down the street. And then, and then here, it would come off of here, sediment would collect in here, so it doesn't get into this drainage. And then whether this goes into a pipe or kind of some subsurface storage area before it moves on.
And don't we have a rain garden right here out the window?
So I see something out there, but it looked like there was a drain. But in the parking lot and at the parking lot of the high school, there are these bioswales, which is just kind of a depression where water can slowly drain versus going right into a pipe.
Very good, yeah. And actually, the next one actually is, yes.
I just had a question.
Yeah, of course.
Who would one contact in order to view your opinion about the tree situation changing when a mansion is being built, so that not every tree is cut down on the property? How does one get that ordinance to change?
Sure. So you're talking about kind of global view of the bylaw, not like on a specific project? Yeah. So the planning board, it's part of the zoning ordinance. So the planning board would be the contact. The NRC was involved with the planning board when we did the last kind of audit, and we saw that 66% of the trees on a lot were being preserved. Is that success? I don't know. That's what the data said. But so when we did that last, that was a coordinated effort between the planning department and the NRC. So I would start with those two boards, and you can email both of them.
Can I add? Is there if I add something to that too? I think also, and we've been having these kinds of conversations. So another thing I didn't mention as part of this sort of flood preparedness initiative with C.R.E.W is we are not just here. We are talking with residents all over the watershed. So last week, where were we? Norfolk, Needham before that, Arlington before that. And what a lot of people, when we're talking and saying like, yes, there's you could contact and whatnot. And I know this is like, there's individuals in this room, but it's often even more powerful when people come together to advocate for something. So I just like, think about who some of your community groups are that you could connect with, and or creating a collective of people together and saying, we 15 neighbors of this street want this passed, so just sometimes having that sort of powerful collective can be really helpful. And that's just something I just want to name, like a lot of places that we've been talking with people bring this up over and over again. Like if I wanted to influence something or support a shift or a change, what would I do? And for sure, like as an individual, contact as individuals, but also to remind people that when you have a community behind you doing something, it's stronger. Often if you have a name for it too, just so you, I just wanted, from experience living in Somerville, we formed a climate coalition, and it was really like 6 of us, but we called ourselves a coalition, and then all of a sudden, like the city council wanted to meet with us. I was like, this is awesome. So just language is powerful, and if you can, you don't have to come up with a formal name, but just like things that help people people are more, I think more leaders are more responsive, more open to meeting when they know that people, like there's groups of people bearing witness or talking to each other and not just individuals. So just know that there's, the power of the collective is really important too. Yeah.
The two of us live in a facility, a retirement
Yeah.
facility, and next door is a nursing home. And the property is designated as wetland property. And I'm not so sure any of us who live there, I'm not so sure that the staff even understands what that means. And I guess my question is, what kind of outreach do you have to institutions here in Wellesley, to colleges, to retirement centers, etc.?
It's a great question. So I'll just talk briefly about wetlands. So we have recognized that many people buy a property and they have no idea that the town has a wetlands bylaw or the state has a Wetlands Protection Act, and that activity is regulated. So we've developed information that we watch the newspaper when a property goes for sale. We send them this letter just notifying them of the fact that you have this on your property. We are here. We've also invited realtors because we get a lot of calls from realtors saying, my client really wants this property, but they want to put in a pool. That's like the most common call we get. Can we do that? And we say, well, it depends. We have to look at what type of resource area it is, how would it get permitted, how are you going to construct it. So we would be more than happy to come speak with the staff or the residents at this community, but we also try these direct outreach techniques. We've put together videos that I'd be happy to share a link if you want to connect. I can send you videos about that. We're trying to educate people about it, but it's hard. It seems one way often. We don't know if people are, reviewing the material that we get. Rarely do we get asked, can we come talk to them about that? It's kind of how quickly can I get through permitting? So those are the types of things that we've done. We have a newsletter that everyone could sign up for, and we regularly include information about wetlands.
I also can, if you want, offering, I think on behalf of like CREW, but especially C.R.E.W. has a whole staff of like educators and whatnot who get calls all the time. I mean, I think what people often think of more is like the library or the school, right? And then the watershed educators come and talk about wetlands and all the different things that you could do to better the land, for lack of a better term. But why couldn't it be a retirement home? Why can't it be other entities, right? Why couldn't it be a housing development? So just to name, like this project has brought us to, I'll name one in particular, like Waltham. There's a place called the Mill, which is right on the river, and people aren't familiar with it, is like already experiencing flooding. And so it's sort of been like a sneak attack. Like we're meeting with residents, but then like the resident services coordinator and like the developer, like people are in the room with us while we're talking with residents. So they're kind of getting educated along with residents. But that was, the Mill was specifically named like for us to go talk with. So we went and did that. But this is, I guess I'm just saying, like, there's no reason why residents of where you live couldn't contact C.R.E.W. and make a request to come and do a program to talk about this and to think through ideas and then connect back with town planners and make that connection. So just want to name, like C.R.E.W. has people get paid on their staff to just go out and do education and talk with residents individually, but also, like I said, institutions, like collectives like you're mentioning. It's just often it's schools. People keep thinking about like, go to the school and talk with the environmental science class or the 8th grade class. But that's really, really important. The one other thing I'll mention too is that that Climate Compact has like an education subcommittee that CREW is sitting on. And one of the things that is being talked about is education for developers, for property managers. Like how can we do more of that? We're thinking about ways that developers also can learn from each other. Like I can't think of off the top of my head, but I imagine that there are some entities that are doing a really great job in setting an example. And I think What helps more often than not is if people who are in a certain position see others in their same position at another institution doing something, and they learn from them, right? So be able to say, you know, from one library to another, hey, library over there, we planted 3 rain gardens, and here's how we did it. And you could do it for little money, or we got residents involved. And then the library learns from, again, a peer, like a peer-to-peer learning network. You know, so we're thinking about how we could build something like that out too for people who are kind of heads of these institutions and are right now maybe not doing anything. So those are just some other ideas, if that's helpful. Yeah. Call C.R.E.W. is really the, get them to come and do some education with you all. Yeah.
Your comment about Somerville rings a bell with
Oh,
me,
yeah.
that, and it's true that, as many people think, we're doing a lot of this town, sustainability planning, that bringing people like you here and so on. I think we're doing a better job in some places. However, we're part of a metro area. The air we breathe comes from lots of places. You probably know about the big study that was done by Tufts University about Boston traffic.
Yes, I was involved with that, the cafe study you're talking about.
And the CAP study.
The particulate matter.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, the findings were that places like Route 9, Route 30, even 135 at certain times of the week, Mass Turnpike, Route 95, getting hundreds of thousands of cars and trucks every day that push particulate matter into the air. And they traced the incidence of medical problems, respiratory and cardiovascular problems, to the whole area, but specifically Somerville, Chinatown, Dorchester, East Boston, so on. When they checked with the hospital records, they found a higher incidence of these medical problems. And there's some things we can do to protect ourselves. For example, if you live within 500 yards, you get this stuff very hard. So I live within, just on the borderline of the 500 yards of Route 9. And if you live within 500 yards, you need to keep your windows closed all the time on that side, facing those highways. In addition to that, you probably could use an air filter in your house to help out. The particulate matter is deadly stuff. Over time, you're breathing it, you don't know it. So it's an area that we have to think about that. One of the things we can do is get rid of the diesel trucks and buses, gradually electrify them. And get those up, because every diesel truck or bus is equivalent to 30 car exhaust. It's a huge fact, and that's a metropolitan plan. An issue, but it's bigger than just our town.
Yeah. Well, it's similar. If we think about air and water, again, it knows no boundaries, so it gets blown, and you're breathing the same air, you know, that was coming all the way from, like you're saying, 93 or I-90 or whatnot.
Right.
Something I was gonna lift up about this. Oh, I think and that actually brings us to kind of one of the things we want to just connect with you all next is thinking about like at home, right? Like what, in addition to what the cities and towns are doing together through these planning councils and whatnot to respond, that there are some simple things that people can do at home in addressing air quality issues and water quality and flooding issues. And a lot of it is the same solutions. Yes, like moving away from diesel trucks because that causes pollution and whatnot for our waterways, just like it does for our air, right? So we also want to just give an opportunity here, you know, for us to be able to name some of the things that you just mentioned, right? So like in response to some of these traffic related air quality issues, you mentioned like, at home, doing some simple things like just thinking about where the wind is blowing from, usually from the west, you know, and it's coming off of certain roadways. Just keeping your windows closed certain times of year. Winter, I think, is actually the worst time of year, interestingly. But those are just like things at home that you could be doing. So we also want to just give a quick opportunity here. If there are things that you all are doing at home, kind of on a smaller scale, right? Like Brandon's talked about and I've talked about, were the large scale projects and nature-based solutions. Are there things that you are doing at home that you would want to lift up here? Has anybody done any of these things? So whether it is planting, whether it's a rain garden or even just gardens, replacing lawns with more water-loving and pollinator plants, changing your downspout so it doesn't go directly into, which Somerville we're notorious for, just people setting their drains right, and their pipes right into a stormwater system, which is not good, rather than sending it into a planted area for filtration. Installing rain barrels or clearing storm drains. Does anybody do any of these things already or know a little bit about it? Yeah.
Well, about 10 years ago, I eliminated all the grass on my properties.
Yes. Nice. Yeah.
Or, I mean, except the grass that just was.
Yeah.
Happened to like living there. And it's been a struggle though. First of all, the neighbors are real happy, I don't think. You know, because it's created this more natural environment. No one's ever really said, gee,
Yeah.
we'd love to see that green grass again in those front corners out. But I think that would be one of the challenges of trying to get people to give up the grass. That was one of the first things that was kind of on my mind here, you know, because my street just is full, and there's being water all the time, all summer long.
Yep. And we're in a drought still. It's hard to believe, but we are. But it's hard to be an innovator, but congrats to you for being one. Yeah.
Maybe one thing on that, I think it does come back to also what you were mentioning about, oh, there's a rain garden right outside. They were like, oh, really? So sometimes I think about like part of why people take issue with something is because they also just don't understand. They think you just let your lawn go and you're lazy and you don't know and you're like bringing down the property values and whatnot. Like, no, this is pollinator habitat. This is to help save water. I'm doing this because I care about the planet. Don't you care about the planet? Don't you want to do this too? So sometimes, and there are a lot of groups, I don't know if Wellesley has these pre-made, but amazing groups like Grow Native, the Wild Seed Project. These are organizations that have pre-made signs that you also can print and put out that help educate people when they go by so that they know that this is an intentional habitat. This is not by accident or because I don't care. It's because I care that this looks like this. So even thinking about like the rain gardens out here, you know, like these are some ideas that you could bring back to the town of like, you know, to help change that culture. Or, you know, how can you educate? Often it's people need to see some sort of signage or something to help them understand. And then they'll be less frustrated and more supportive
I
of the
have a
decisions.
pollinator garden, and one thing that concerned me was an arborist says that hemlock tree needed some treatment, needed a chemical, and so I'm afraid that chemical may be leaking into the soil. So I got a biological predator. It may not be as effective, but it's better than nothing. So they're using something called a green lace insect, which is going to kill whatever is the hemlock disease.
Gotcha.
Organism better than using chemical.
Yeah. Another sort of nature, like how do we, utilize nature to respond to an issue versus chemicals,
I just want to note there are little seed packets right back there with the plant list so that you can start your own little, they work well in pots, but they would also work well if you wanted to rip up a small section of the grass. The town does have a rain barrel program. It's actually run through this company called the Great American Rain Barrel Company, and they're geniuses. They're actually olive distributors. So they get big vats of olives, they pull all the olives out and put them in jars, and then they resell the things they come in for rain barrels. So you can get them in various colors, but we help organize that. Look for our newsletter. Again, we just had the pickup this month, so you'll have to wait till next time. Or if you get online, you can find other communities nearby who they supply these rain barrels for. But there's information about that on our website.
And then you can use that water for
Seed
your
packets.
I'm sorry?
You were talking about seed packets. Do you have a list of the bee-friendly plants that are by the library?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's all online. If you need it printed out, I can mail one to you, but it's on.
What keyword do you use?
Just search Simons Park, Wellesley. Or I suppose you could look up habit to habitat. But Simons Park, Wellesley, you should be able to find that, and it has a whole list of plants and what insects they support.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm being mindful of time, but we did want to at least give minutes, some time to talk to you a little bit more about, this is kind of where Crew's wheelhouse is. Again, I'm happy to also, if anybody wants to talk about native plants and whatnot, I can the list is long. I'm a part of a group in Somerville that focuses on native plants. We passed our native plant ordinance there. I'm just involved in a lot of things that are more about native plants and the land. So I'm happy to talk about that more aside. But with Crew, we're also thinking about at home, right? Like when flooding, a lot of what we're doing here is thinking about like the land and how we do things in preparation or in response on a larger scale. But like, what about at home? Hi, sir. How are you? So how would you, at home prepare? What would you do when a flood does occur, or when there's an extreme heat event? So I just wanted to turn over to Lexi to just share. There's some things that are happening in town, and then we have a couple resources we can give you for how you can, again, better prepare for when something actually is happening in real time at home and with your loved ones.
Yeah, so if you go to the website in the top right corner, you can sign up for emergency alerts through the town. It'll basically alert you of like flooding, any major like storms, any like road closure, like just help you keep you informed. When you click the red circle, it'll prompt you to this Smart 911 thing. You sign up, and then you can sign up for all alerts to come right to your phone or email. So there's also an emergency preparedness website, which has a lot of really great resources for you to use. So there's preparedness responses and tips to use. There's checklists, which we will be handing out of like a starter checklist. But this includes everyone in your family, from like adults, children to pets. And then there's also like talking about emergencies and preparing for them is really hard, and it's kind of daunting when you bring it up to like younger kids or younger family members. So this gives you like a little guide on how to talk about that. And we also wanted to lift up that in an emergency that the town has already designated an emergency shelter, and that's at the local high school. So all of that was on this website in the top left. There's also a medical reserve corps that you can sign up for. It's basically a group of citizens who are going to be trained for any health emergency or just larger emergencies that'll impact the community at large. So they help for emergency preparedness, medical support, vaccination clinics, any public health emergency. And so then there's local contacts listed on here, but you can also just go online and search that and find resources for it. Here are more resources. These ones are for like statewide resources and countrywide. So American Red Cross has a lot of great resources on how to prepare for any type of emergency. Additionally, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health has a Together We're Ready initiative, and it just helps residents stay prepared for any emergency that may face them, whether it's flooding, fires, whatever. And then you can also call 211 for non-emergency assistance and post-disaster response. That's their Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. So we're handing around right now a document holder and an emergency blanket. The blanket's similar to like after people run marathons, they put the blanket on, it keeps them really warm. That's basically what it is. It's condensed like in one little square. So if there's ever an emergency and you need it, it'll start your thing. And then the document holder is for in case of flooding, you can keep any important documents in there, such as like your passport, your social security card, anything that you don't want to get damaged and you want to have handy is good to keep in there. But it's also important to prepare outside of the necessities of like, medications, where you're gonna go, your documents. It's also, we like to look at it from like a preciousness lens so for example, in my preparedness kit, I know to make sure to grab the pair of earrings that my great aunt left me. Those mean a lot to me and I would not want to lose them. So while there's Lee, do you have the document of, okay, yeah. So there's a document going around that has like a general packing list to put in your emergency preparedness kit. But I really encourage people to consider things outside of a general survival and more of like something that will help your soul survive during these times. I don't know if anyone wants to share anything that they would want to pack, so like family photos, jewelry, heirlooms, anything larger than that. But yeah, this is basically just a way to get you started for emergency preparedness planning. I know we gave you a lot of like information today. So on the document we shared, on one side is all of the resources and how to stay informed, and the other side is just like a preparedness list to start kind of directing your mind towards where you can pack and how to go about that. Does anyone want to share anything they'd want to consider during their preparedness planning?
It was a very informative presentation. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to really just name some of the groups so people know about them?
Sure.
Yeah.
I know we're over time, but in addition to the town departments of the Climate Action Committee and the Natural Resources Commission, wetlands, trails, et cetera, there's a local conservation land trust, the Wellesley Conservation Land Trust. Sustainable Wellesley is really the grassroots organization doing a lot of sustainability initiatives. We have the community gardens, Wellesley Green Schools for the kids in school. All of these are ways that you all can get involved. Run for office, volunteer with one of the organizations. Great ways to be involved. And cutting short here, the Climate Action Plan identifies 6 different pathways of how the town is going to address our climate change, and specifically its emissions. And so, we deal mostly with the natural resources side and tree planting and wetlands protection, but there are specific services available to you all if you're interested in weatherizing your home or looking into conversion from oil or natural gas to electric renewable energy. You can have a home energy audit through the Climate Action Committee. Here, you could insulate your home, heat and cool with heat pumps, install solar panels. All of these initiatives, you can get a lot of information from these 3 volunteers who will come to your home. You just need to reach out, and they would be more than happy. This is Fred, Larry, and Mary will be happy to set up an appointment and come speak with you about some of these initiatives you can take action on at home. And you save money.
And I can just, again, be mindful of time, just briefly, just wanted to highlight some of the other things that C.R.E.W makes available, some of the other programs that we have and resources. So when C.R.E.W came about in like 2018, really everything has kind of grown out of our central program, which is just called a Climate Resilience Hub program. And so it's basically thinking about some of these institutions, right? Like how our institutions, our organizations, schools, libraries, nature centers, senior centers, right, can be not just responsive to needs based on like why they already sort of naturally exist, but can we like add another layer to that or just expand a little bit and also see how these institutions could be responsive when there's an extreme weather event, right? So this is an opportunity to think about, so these are just some examples. So this is the Boston Nature Center. I don't know where this house of worship is, but they're definitely in our network. That's the Dallas Public Library. Their entire library system is a hub of ours. And what that basically means is people become hub leaders within those institutions, and then they're connected to the broader network. So similar to the Climate Compact, it's another network that exists. So if a librarian says, we would love to do rain gardens, but we have no idea how you would do that, you could connect to the hubs network. Or we would love to create a cooling center, but we don't know how to do that. They could connect with this broader network. So you think about where in Wellesley, maybe the senior center, could become a resilience hub, and then you'd be tapped into this network. And then other things that we do as well, which any individuals or organizations can participate in, is something called Climate Preparedness Week. So it's the last week of September every year in connection with National Preparedness Month. Lexi is going to be our lead with C.R.E.W on that this year. And it's just basically a week protected in the calendar because often when there is a crisis that emerges, these ideas of preparedness can kind of get lost or we put them to the side. So protecting time in our calendar every year makes sure that towns, cities, organizations prioritize this. So we'll have a whole list of events on our website, and you can also, if you're part of a group and you want to do an event during that week, you just contact us, we put you on the map, and everybody knows about it. And then we do trainings, kind of like longer versions of what we kind of threw some materials at you, but we do a longer training around that too. So things around kit making, heat resilience, et cetera. And then one of my favorite things in Somerville, you talked about like you're trying to reach 65% tree canopy. I think in Somerville, we're trying to get like 17%. Like that's our goal. So you can imagine it's a very different environment, right? But also part of the same watershed. So I'm part of a group that we help rip up pavement and transform. If you can imagine, people there have like completely paved yards. It's incredible. But a lot of people want to get it out, so we help get volunteers together and have a party and eat pizza and rip out asphalt. And it's the most magical, meaningful day for me. And then this is we mentioned, the Charles River flood model is what brings us here today. And then we're actually not, we're at time anyways, but a lot of these questions are things that you've all already been offering responses to, I think. So kind of where do you think we could be doing more? And that's everybody from the larger regional groups like C.R.E.W, community-based groups like C.R.E.W, your town planners, your senior centers, et cetera, et cetera. So just, we've documented some of that today, and we will get back to the people who are in this room, including Kevin. Hi, Kevin. Here at the senior center. But as you have more ideas, now you know who some of us are, and you can reach out to let us know how we can be more responsive along with you. And then thinking again, how, please share with us over time. Sometimes it really is about communication. Brandon just mentioned a lot of different projects that are going on in the community that often people don't know about just because they're not hearing about it. So if you can think of like more effective ways to be communicating with you all, we would want to know all those things, right? Sometimes there is stuff happening. It's just a matter of letting you know that it's happening. So that's it. So yeah, so just before you go today, again, feel free to, if you want to go back, there's a table that has lots more information there. Please feel free to take as many snacks as you would like with you. Don't forget to sign up for the alerts that Lexi mentioned. And yeah, we'll be here hanging out, cleaning up. So just any questions you have. And thank you for your attention and presence today. Yeah.